found in this film.
Oh, but
we want the sound. Yes.
The actual landing on Mars.
No. Oh, the moon? Yeah. But that's in rare moments, but I haven't had that exposed to anything otherwise, but I guess I just did hear a lecture on that. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I'd like to look into that book more. I don't know.
Yeah. These are messages dropping on the screen in both Russian and English. We see the atmospheric pressure of 0.7 atmospheres, which is pretty good pressure. And finally, when the ship lands, some creature is crawling in the dirt nearby, right in front of them. Obviously disturbed by the...
look at that.
It's something like a mole.
Jesus.
Well, this is a supposed landing on Mars, shot from a landing probe.
It's very dark in there.
The film has been shown only once in the United States in 1977 by a Los San Francisco station. And
But it was just like 1984. It was like George Orwell's 1934, or at least no, I don't mean that. I mean what's his face?
notice the
1939 War of the Worlds.
windows. I thought it is a fake landing from an earthly helicopter landing on the Earth, but I don't know of any. I'll be very glad of somebody with helicopter experience that can find an American helicopter with a front window of this shape, although I highly doubt it. It is possible. Now, if we remember Bob Emenegger's film, UFOs, It Has Begun, on the 1989 UFO Symposium in Las Vegas, John Lear said that talking with Bob Emenegger about, remember there was a dramatized sequence of a UFO landing on Holloman Air Force Base in the early 50s. And John Lear asked Bob Emenegger, how did they do that shot? It's about a 7-second segment. It's very nice. The UFO comes from atop of the mountain and dives steeply to land on the tarmac. And Bob Emenegger said, no, this is the real sequence. They just allowed us to include that much. So this is one instance where they would weave into a fictional story some real fact or even some real footage. Then there have been persistent rumors that a wealthy Southern California movie producer has been shown actual footage of a landing of a bigger ship, and then that ended up with a production of a major fiction film on this topic, which is probably the story behind the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So there is a pattern of weaving real footage into fictional or semi-fictional scenarios, and this is the ground that I approached this film. And then further on I discovered many technical details into it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just to play the devil's advocate here. We are finding our governments have lied to us on virtually everything. They tell us there's no life on Mars. I realize that this is very obvious life there, but how do we know with absolute certainty that there is no life on Mars?
Very good question. I had the same question about the moon, but from Fred Stecklin's book you can clearly see the green vegetation at some areas on the moon.
Well, tell us more about that. Both the moon and Mars.
No. It's a very interesting arrangement here. Whenever a camera is sent to a different world, it sits on top of the craft. A lens will be sticking out, but never ever was camera put inside a room with a window. You don't send an unmanned craft to Mars where the cameras is inside the room, behind the window. Why? Because it's too expensive, the craft is too big.
We're getting a good picture here, and connecting it.
He said that you had to fit it to an IC something 40,
yeah.
and you get a jukebox. Does that mean anything?
We've heard of it.
And he said that you've got to play back Valentine's tape. That's all.
We connected up the printed circuit and played once again the videotape that Sir William Ballantyne, before his death, had sent to his friend, John Hendry. This time, we obtained an acceptable picture, which you are now about to see as we saw it. To be an authentic record of the first and secret landing on Mars by an unmanned space probe from Earth. We also believe the date given, May the 22nd, 1962, to be accurate. Clearly, the blanket of total security by which this information has been covered could only have been maintained by the active cooperation of governments at very high level. Equally clearly, there must have been powerful reasons why the true conditions on Mars, suitable as they appear to be for human habitat, have been kept secret. Indeed, the effort which has gone into persuading the rest of the world that the opposite is true argues that some operation of supreme importance has been going on beneath the security cover. We believe that that operation is Dr. Carl Gerstein's Alternative 3. Whether a human survival colony has already been established on Mars, or whether plans are still in preparation for its transportation from the Moon to Mars, we don't know. But we put out this program tonight as a challenge to those who do know to tell us the truth. We regret if the implications of what you've seen are less than optimistic for the future of life on this planet. It has been our task, however, to present the facts as we understand them and to await the response. Good night.
I want to give you some additional information out of my research about Alternative 3. Does it work? I want to give you some additional information out of my investigation about Alternative 3 and life on Mars. Number one, Alternative 3 mentioned a first rocket start to Mars in February 1960 or 62. With a big explosion where many scientists in Russia died. This one was confirmed in February 1991 by the Russian news agency TASS in an article published in many British newspapers. Tony Dodd has it. He has sent me a copy. Whoever is interested in deeper investigation can get a copy from me or Tony Dodd in England. So this is a matter of fact. This point in Alternative 3 is definitely true. February 1962, I believe. I'm not sure. Second, we had a conference in September 1990 in Tallahassee in Florida of leading Mars investigators. And they all concluded that there is a big possibility that there is indeed life on Mars. It can be microorganisms, it can be hidden in the ice masses of the Antarctic regions, it can be underground in a warmer region, it can be everywhere. Third, the Viking lander in 1976 concluded out of they had 3 experiments if there's life on Mars. Chemical ones and biological ones and whatever. 2 of them were positive, 1 negative. You can read it in a book published in German by the famous German science author. It is the German Carl Sagan, Johannes von Butler. He is a member of the Royal British Astronomical Society. 2 out of 3 experiments concluded there is life on Mars, organic life. I'm not talking about cities right now. We have cities on Mars, we have pyramids on Mars, we have a face on Mars, and a lot of structures. Number 4. They did the same experiment in the Antarctic region of our planet. The result was 2 to 1 light on Mars. So if we compare it, it is obvious that there could be indeed life on Mars. Another thing, my friend Fred Steckling from Vista, California, whoever is interested in more investigation can write him, has written a fine article in one American magazine, I don't know for sure, about life on Mars. He is a meteorologist, and he checked all the data we got on Mars, and some of them are definitely wrong because one thing is not, you cannot bring in order with another thing, another data, and whatever. They took pictures of nebula on Mars and on Moon, fog on Mars and on Moon. He published pictures in his book. We discovered somebody else on Moon, somebody mentioned the Moon here, of cloud formations over the rims of moon craters and this kind of things. Information that there is indeed an atmosphere on the Moon was released by NASA after the first landing on Moon, Apollo 11, in July 1969. analysis indicates that there is indeed a big cover-up. And last night I spoke about George Adamski. Today we got a confirmation of George Adamski by a lady from Venus. And now we are getting a confirmation of George Adamski by material about Moon, about Mars, and about other planets. We shouldn't believe disinformation spread by official NASA scientists. And we should be very critical in the analysis of these data. If you read Zachariah Sitchin's new book, Genesis Revisited, you find a lot of more information about the Mars. For example, the Russian Phobos probe sent to Mars in 1988, 1999 had the capability of infrared censoring of the Mars surface. And they discovered rectangular patterns on Mars. Zachariah told me he saw the movie, and he's making a movie indeed with a Zurich movie producer, and they got the original Phobos 2 films from the Soviet Space Agency in Moscow. And you can see rectangular patterns like Los Angeles from the Earth. That's what Zachariah mentioned. So there is indeed a strong indication that there is, like David Bowie asked, is there life on Mars? Yes, there is life on Mars. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Vladimir.
The first suspicious thing is that the camera is inside the cabin and it's looking through a window. The second suspicious thing is look at the curvature of the window. It shows that it is a circular craft and the lower diameter is larger than the upper diameter. So it's like a cupola type craft, which is a very familiar circular shape of a flying saucer. Let's go on. The film is patched out of several sequences. The thing flies low, then the next sequence is, the thing is high up in the sky, then it flies low. This is the reason for... Then we are up again. But look at this, look where the horizon is.
About a 45-degree bank to the right.
We are making a 45-degree banking maneuver at almost 180-degree turn. This is probably the biggest argument against a standard Earth probe with a chemical thruster engine similar to the one that landed on the moon is used here, because the lunar lander can search for a place only along a straight line, and by pressing on or off on the throttle, you choose a closer or a further away place to avoid the rocks. But you can never make turns, and not at all a sharp banking turn and almost going back. Also, the acceleration of the pilots for this to be a chemical thruster craft would crash them into the seats. These would be clouds. There is something like a that looks like a road here. You would see it in normal motion. Here's the road.
Температура 4 градуса Цельсия.
4 degrees temperature, we were told a little bit different.
Wind speed 21 kilometers per hour from southwest. Скорость ветра 21 км в час.
And this is the most important thing. The atmosphere is 7/10 of our normal atmospheric Earth level. So I think 700 millibar with the air pressure at like 6.
Over 10 psig. 14.7 thousand sea level, right? Times, what did you say, 0.707?
No, these are millibars. These are millibars. This is an atmosphere. 1 atmosphere is 1,000 millibars. So we are having 7/10 of an atmosphere, 7/10 of a sea level pressure. So we are somewhere like
10.4 pounds per square.
So we are somewhere like a mile or something above sea level on the Earth. This is a pretty good atmosphere, breathable without any oxygen mass.
Like Denver.
Yeah.
Sphere pressure 707.7 millibars. Атмосфера давления 7 millibars.
Now there are several grammatical mistakes in the Russian language. I think these are artists. These are playing the Russian role because they do some grammatical mistakes that the Russians do not use.
On the nose, здесь работает. Stand by for landing, Curacao. Stand by. Мы достигли. Hallelujah. We're My God, what is that?
Now, when the saucer landed, if this were chemical thruster engine with a soft soil like this one so that a mole could dive through it, there would be a lot of dust flying around. There is not a speck of dust flying, which is a typical case of an anti-gravity device, softly landing without moving a particle. Something else that is very important here, which is difficult to see. Observe at the moment of landing, the camera would shake, the edge of the screen would shake a little bit relative to the window, which shows that the camera is on a tripod inside the cabin and not fixed firmly to the body of the craft. This would never happen if this was a firmly attached camera on an unmanned landing probe. My suspicion is that this is a landing probe and that the crew and the source of the conversation is inside the craft and not elsewhere on the moon or here on the ground. And if you can see the shaking of the camera relative to the frame of the window.
My God, what is that? Something moving. Something moved there. Boy, if they ever take the rest off this thing, it's going to be the biggest date in history. 22nd May, 1962. We're on the planet Mars, and we have life. Замечательно! Отлично! Поздравляем! Наконец-то!
We believe that to be an authentic record of the first and secret landing on Mars by an unmanned space probe from Earth. We also believe the date given, May the 22nd, 1962, to be accurate.
It is still open for debate, but for myself, I have found several very serious technical clues that would have surely been overlooked by a crew imitating this sequence. I have an intuitive feeling that very often some real footage or real facts are artfully woven into a fictional scenario with the purpose of educating the public, because sooner or later the technological advances of the secret government would become so far ahead and away from society that people would experience tremendous stress when they are recruited into the secret system to work for them. And this is something that they cannot afford to happen. It would be just a loss of too much money. Very briefly, I would comment on the presentation that Mr. Albilik did at the Whole Life Expo in Pasadena this year. Mr. Bilik is a physicist, has degrees from the best universities, and he worked as a Navy spaceman with the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, geez, sorry.
Basically, the government was shooting for optical and radar invisibility, and they ended up with time travel, teleportation, and throughportation. I was sitting amazed at the talk that he gave. It was very interesting because at the end of his talk, I had a feeling similar to the feeling of the first civilian leaders that were invited secretly to visit the crash saucers and the dead alien bodies. And we know of their comments that they made. I had the feeling that the world has ended with finite, how was it said? Basically the stress that they were experiencing. And after our Bilik's talk, I was in a similar situation because, to summarize briefly what he said, basically, all the time travel fictional films that we have seen on television for the last 30, 40 years are true. The Germans developed time travel during the war, then the Navy did it immediately after the war. The Philadelphia experiment was resumed much later with a great success. The government has traveled 100,000 years back in time and about 1,000,000 years forward in time. That our stealth bombers, fighters, and nuclear air carriers are equipped with the Philadelphia technology. If you remember the fictional film, The Final Countdown, about the nuclear air carrier going back in time by mistake through a dimensional time warp, cyclone, and ending up close to Pearl Harbor before the Japanese attack. Basically, these are things that are real and that all nuclear carriers are equipped to do. Something else, the physics that we know of, basically the Einsteinian physics, is just a kindergarten physics. After the top guns graduate from MIT and Caltech and signed the agreement with that to work for the secret bases, then they begin the real study of the physics that they have. Right now, the secret government uses physics of 8 classes of energies. Only the lowest class is based on Einsteinian mechanics, and the speed of light, the speed of propagation of a signal is the speed of light. The next class, one above it, has the fastest speed of propagation equal to the speed of light squared. The third class is speed of light cubed, and so on up to speed of light to the 8th power. So you can imagine 300,000 kilometers per second, the speed of light, multiplied by 300,000, and so on 8 times. There are technical devices that can communicate in real time with any point in our galaxy. You don't hear this time delay that you're hearing when you call Europe and the signal goes through the satellite. Hardware built by American companies. There was a strange device that is a tower with a huge radio telescope-like antenna on top. That is basically a teleportation and time travel device. With that device, one can teleport to any point in the universe and back, and in our galaxy. And actually a full circle was made around the center of the galaxy with landing back on Earth in 24 hours. This sounds very bizarre, I have to agree. But in some government research projects, and this is not a latest project, these were events that happened 10, 20, maybe more years ago. Also, time travels have been utilized by the government with the purpose of changing of our history. What we have seen in back to the future, someone going back in time, changing the history, and then doing something which would change his present-day history when he comes back is actually true. And there have been many instances of such experiments or attempts to change, to influence history in this or that way that is suitable to the government. And now I would like to run the last slides that I have. Yeah.
No, go ahead, sit down here.
I don't know if you can turn down the lights again. I'm sorry, can we turn down the lights again, please? This is another nice book about discrepancies that doesn't make sense on the moon. And several other books. Fred Steckling's books is the most interesting one, with pictures of mining machines leaving large tracks on the surface of the moon. This is a kilometer and several hundred meters long mothership hanging over one of the craters and leaving its shadow on the surface. We talk about the possibility of Star Trek. Actually, Mr. Billick is here, and I would like to express my personal gratitude to him for his courage and for all the revelations that he has done. Because for me, this was the discovery of a completely different universe of experiments. The experiments on time travel, teleportation, and throughportation, moving of one object through another. I've read a lot of books coming from Eastern Europe. I've read a lot of books on the KGB, on the GRU, which is the Russian NSA, and on methods of disinformation. Actually, as the superpowers had a fight for the German scientists, rocket scientists after the war, probably there had been a similar fight for the secret police and disinformation specialists from the Third Reich that were divided among the superpowers, and that brought these techniques of disinformation to them. Another important book that I find is Orwell's 1984, which appeared a little bit before the Cold War started. Recently I've been speculating about one scenario that probably the Cold War started not coincidentally a year after the first saucer crash in 47. The Cold War started in 48. And the reason for that, the scenario for that, one shouldn't look further than Orwell's own book about the fictional political reality of 1984, where the world is divided into several super states, superpowers, constantly constantly at war with each other, but a soft war, prophylactically nuking each other from time to time. And this all in order to support the secrecy and the totalitarian structure of these societies. So basically the Cold War is a version of the scenario that Orwell outlined in his book. With all these secret projects, joint projects behind the scenes, exploration of the solar system and beyond with a Star Trek scenario, joint bases on the Moon and Mars with the alternative 3 scenario. Obviously, the necessity of the Cold War was simply to keep the secrecy going on. I have several slides on conspiracy here. Through the UFOs, I entered into the field of alternative energy, as I have many UFologist friends that came from that same field. Recently, I found by chance a rare book by T. Henry Moray on his generators that shows inside the experiments that he did running 20 light bulbs, an iron, and a cooking plate and a fan for a week with his antenna, without generator, without any visible outside sources of energy. For me, this is an absolute true technology, as are dozens of others that have been suppressed violently over the years. We are all familiar with the Straker Memorandum, or most of us are familiar with this film, and with the AIDS conspiracy theories that AIDS is a bacteriological weapon for population control. Unfortunately, I didn't make a slide of the Congress decision. It was the Senate the Appropriation Committee for the military budget for, I think it was it was in the 60s. I found a page through a friend of mine from the Library of Congress, half a page about the actual decision to appropriate $10 million for research on an immunological, bacteriological weapon that would basically destroy the immune system of the victim. We see the idea of the government utilizing flying saucers steadily starting to pop up into UFO literature. And I would like to congratulate Bill Hamilton for his work in this field. About the rumors that UFOs have been watching American saucers, and basically every NASA flight, and especially the flights to the moon, were followed by UFOs. Rumors that I've heard personally. My feeling now is that simply these flights were followed by American government saucers just as a safety measures in case something happens. So there is truth even to these tabloid realities of saucers following our Apollo ships to the moon. There are several basic books on conspiracy that were important for my understanding of the society here. Another, call it conspiracy, basically deals with financial intrigues, financial manipulations. The Fourth Reich of the Rich is a brilliant book that, on top of the financial intrigues, it explains how the communist movement was started, financed, organized by the Illuminati, and by the financial oligarchy of Europe. It was literally a revelation for me. An important work on secret societies is the Bible of the Freemasonry, the Morals and Dogma book. I found a very nice cassette by a fundamentalist priest who spent 2 years digging into Masonic libraries, and it was a brilliant cassette with quotes only from the Morals and Dogma and the history of Freemasonry, basically stating that the lower ranks of this organization are given one view of reality, but the higher ranks, and especially after one graduates from the 32nd rank, only they are allowed to have the book. It can be found from time to time in second-hand bookstores. And in the book it clearly states that the purpose of this organization is to serve the, how should I call it, the philosophical hierarchy, or one of the competing hierarchies, religio-philosophical hierarchies that compete for power on this planet. These of you that are familiar with Urantia book and several papers on the Lucifer rebellion there, this is probably the most concise and illuminating treatment of this phenomenon. According to the Urantia book, the Lucifer rebellion happened 250,000 years ago, and it led to a major division, philosophical and political division, between the spirit beings, the angelic beings, managing this and several other planets of our local universe. Another interesting conspiracy, and very important conspiracy books are the Cosmic Conspiracy is a book on the interface between the terrestrial conspiracies and the ETs above them. If we take the book as it is, believing it 100%, I believe in a hierarchy of conspiracy levels. Well, it is very unfashionable and unpopular for someone, let's say in academia or even in the media, to say that he believes seriously in conspiracy theories. On the contrary, I would label myself a super conspiratist. Namely, I believe that most of the popular conspiracy theories that we've heard of are just the lower level of this hierarchical structure, this pyramid of successive tiers. And the terrestrial conspiracies are interfaced with ET power structures, with confederations, with groups of planets around us that are naturally vying for power. All these different contactee accounts for me are, on top of everything else, they are a very interesting political campaign of different ET races presenting their business cards to our civilization. We may choose to go that way or the way of a different civilization. And probably this is the way that things work in the universe. When the time comes for a planet to be open to the outside world, then everybody who is in the vicinity and thinks that they may contribute with something will present their introductory package, their business card. It's a fascinating undertaking to try to go deeper into major revelatory sources. At the beginning I was a Billy Meyer freak. I believed only in this version, in view of the universe. Then I discovered the Urantia book, and soon I realized that they were incompatible in some major details. Very many of us tend to discard something if it contradicts with something else, without trying to find some deeper underlying reason and to try to patch the two seemingly confronting philosophies into a structure that would basically overlap without having the necessity to negate anything of the two. And very recently, just several months ago, I had some serious, a little bit deeper reading of the WASP book. And basically for me, I agree with the Urantia book as this is the continuation of the revelation given from the Trinitarian hierarchy, the Holy Trinity, the hierarchy of the Holy Trinity. The Urantia book is a continuation of the revelation given in the New Testament, while the WASP book is a continuation of the revelation given in the Old Testament. The WASP book is the universe according to Jehovah. These two books are propose two very different ascension schemes for our souls. Very different, incompatible. But it's fascinating because they share too many common values, and actually the ethical and moral values are the same. One has to do good and to love his neighbor in order to succeed in these two different schooling systems. Ellen White wrote a book at the end of the century which is widely revered in the fundamental Christian religions, actually. Sometimes I go to a Seventh-day Adventist church and she was recommended to me. They consider it to be a channeler of a biblical kind. And in a way, it's a fascinating book because it treats the, how should I call it, not the political struggle, but this attempts to influence our planet to go either one of these two ways. Now I have to say that these are not the only two progression schemes in the universe, that there are some others. The Billy Meyer case is an interesting one because of their belief in the reincarnation. Interestingly enough, none of these two books include the reincarnation as a possible progression scheme. And I think that these are just possible and probably really existing alternative schooling systems in the universe. After this little brief discussion of terrestrial conspiracy theories, I would go a little bit into genetics, into genetic experiment. Recently, I've developed some keen interest. I'm trying to explain the gray alien scenario. This whole presentation has been a preparation for this explanation. The Germans tried to breed a super race with Mendelian genetics. We're told that it was a failed experiment, but very recently I heard through a person that I value very highly that actually similar experiments are going on in Brazil, in secluded places where kids are raised until the age of 10, basically in a cubicle without any human presence. The food is given through the input window and the output is taken through the output window. In order to devoid these individuals from any emotions, to make them logical, in order to increase their thinking potential. But I'm not a geneticist, and as I said, with this presentation I tried to investigate the keys to the magical keys to three kingdoms, the flying saucer, which is my field of research. I rely entirely on Mr. Bilik's discussion of the time travel research. And I will be very glad to pool resources with somebody who is specialist in genetics, because I have an intuitive feeling that our research in genetics is the major direction of our efforts. Make a content analysis of any scientific journal that you see, and you would immediately see that from the funding and from the articles that are published, maybe 2/3 are on genetics. These are pictures from these programs of having children raised in special homes. The Germans had ample guinea pig material in the concentration camps. They did, in these camps, they did research into areas that would have been unthinkable in a normal academic liberal establishment with the working social controls of a religious community. And I've been investigating recently any candidates for any technologies that are candidates for the crackings of deciphering of the human genome way back by the Germans, or at least in the late 40s, early 50s by the superpower governments. Right now, about $10 billion would be spent on deciphering the human genome. I have a feeling that it has already been deciphered in the same way as the whole project, NASA project of going to the moon, was a smoke screen to keep the other nations from joining the exclusivity club. And the moon was visited long before the Apollo project. I have a similar feeling that the Human Genome Project is another small screen that is intended to keep the exclusivity of this club from other nations joining in, and that it could have well been deciphered. My major candidate for this technology, the magical key to the genetic technology, is the right microscope, which is one of the sources told me that it was a scalar wave Tesla microscope that could see a living virus, something that no present-day electron microscope could do. You have to kill the virus or gold-plate it in order to make it visible. And the right microscope was invented in 1932. My question is, could it have been possible with few upgradings of this microscope to actually see the DNA and to be able to decipher the genome, the human genome? If this was true, then my feeling is that all the genetic experimentation that we read in books on the abduction scenario, but Hopkins books, with his Tribble books, and others, my feeling is that the government is the major player behind these genetic experimentations. I do believe that there are gray aliens on this planet present, and I do believe that there are dozens, maybe hundreds of different gray, particularly gray alien races. But my feeling is that it's not the grays or their ET handlers that are interested in our genetics. I think that the government has the major interest in deciphering the secrets of the genetic code. Well, they have interstellar travel, they have time travel. Basically, there are few other boundaries that are left unconquered. I think this is the last boundary, the genetic. I fully believe in the cattle mutilations, but my feeling is that they are done by the government in order to check contamination of the environment by radioactive materials. Coring out the rectum and the tongue area is a very simple physical means of measuring contamination on the input of a system and on the output, and correlating the differences. One would know how much the whole body is contaminated, rather than dissecting the whole cow and getting dozens of samples and averaging them. Obviously, this was done to arrive at some table. After that, it is probably enough just to take samples from the input and the output. My feeling about the Gove Breeze sightings is that they tend to develop very similar to the Billy Meyer scenario. But unlike the Billy Meyer case that has been ignored, debunked by the government and the official UFO circles, my feeling is that this is a contact case that has been orchestrated by the government, and that is supported by the same people that have been most active in debunking Billy Meyer. I've talked personally, one by one, to all of them. I have my own test questions to figure out the political position of a UFO researcher, and all of them have tested positive. We all remember the Men in Black stories of the 60s. I have a feeling that the genetic experimentation has advanced so much that the human genetic code has been cracked and recorded on a computer, on a supercomputer, a long time ago. And that in these genetic labs, actually, we have computer-aided design of new designs for beings, of hybrids between different types of animals, between humans and animals. The Men in Black could easily be the first and not very successful models of a biological robot, a cyborg, that looks like us. Mr. Data from the Star Trek reality is probably a more advanced version of such technology. From some time I've been seriously suspecting the possibility that the little grays could too be biological robots, cyborgs, without souls. This would explain their lack of compassion and personality. This would very neatly explain their supposedly beehive mentality, where each individual is controlled by the collective of other individuals. It's not the collective, it's the supercomputer, either in the saucer or somewhere, the big mainframe. There are little grays that are cyborgs for other grays. Maybe the design was introduced here. With a proper technology, you can put a little gray, the information, the know-how, the software, how to build a little gray on few optical discs. And it is very easy technically to transfer such a being from one civilization to another. It would have even been created by our government. If we can turn on the lights. And this is basically the end of it. Is there any questions?
Yeah. Yeah. At the risk of being unpopular, I wanted to point out about the landing on Mars. A few observations from a point of view of someone who's had a lot of experience in special effects. The fact that it's broken up into about 5 or 6 sections arouses suspicion exactly what the effects man wants and decided in order to be able to break it up and make it easier to find out. This doesn't prove anything, but it's an effects analysis of this. If you look at it carefully, you'll notice that on the shot where you make the big turn, you are not moving forward, hardly at all. And if you look at that, if you see it again and you imagine it as an immense mural, a painting, like a matte painting, like you see in Star Wars, and this was a couple years before Star Wars at most, rotating. And you're rotating a mural through that window. You're not moving forward in that shot. It could be a painting. Then it's all blurred again, and then you're moving forward, but at a considerably lower angle over red terrain.
This is a very good argument, actually.
Could be
It's a
red
very
terrain over the earth.
good argument by a colleague of ours that it is beginning to show this suspicious look.
I'll give you one more.
My answer to this argument is that we all know that sources can stop on a dime,
Yes.
so it can be very easily explained.
This is not a proof that it is. It's just an argument that
but it's a very good
could be.
argument.
And there's one other.
Not that I haven't thought about that. It's a very good argument.
There's one other argument here to argue that it's fake. One thing that the special effects technology at that time for creating creatures and movement artificially, such as a mole-type creature moving across the ground that displaces the earth, it was stop-motion animation, where everything is shot one frame at a time. With Star Wars, we now have the technology to do this with what we call computer control, where the camera can be moving through the whole thing. You couldn't do it back then, coming off of the days of Ray Harryhausen special effects, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the early color things from 1957 on. What you needed to do for that kind of special effect was have a stationary camera. And if you look at this very carefully, you'll notice that the ship lands and reaches an absolutely stable position. It has stopped prior to the first motion of the dirt. Now you have a slight pan in on the dirt as the dirt is moving, which can easily be done with the zoom lens moving at one frame at a time as the dirt is being moved one frame at a time and you're moving in on it. But the prerequisite for doing it as a special effect is have your ship stop first, have the camera stop, be in a stationary position, then start your stop frame. And this is done in accordance with what would be necessary for that technique. And I think those clues, in addition to the fact this is broken up into 5 different sequences, argue poorly for this being real. And I do think that some of the flyovers could be Earth shots over red desert.
But, I mean, it can be easily faked. I mean, it can be easily staged, very easily. My feeling is that very often real facts and real footage is woven for educational purposes. And this is the only ground that I look at the film for being real.
And to make one final sum up, I agree, it could be either way, but when you look at it,
to be an authentic record of the first and secret landing on Mars by an unmanned space probe from Earth. We also believe the date given, May the 22nd, 1962, to be accurate. Clearly, the blanket of total security by which this information has been covered could only have been maintained by the active cooperation of governments at very high level. Equally clearly, there must have been powerful reasons why the true conditions on Mars, suitable as they appear to be for human habitat, have been kept secret. Indeed, the effort which has gone into persuading the rest of the world that the opposite is true argues that some operation of supreme importance has been going on beneath the security cover. We believe that that operation is Dr. Carl Gerstein's Alternative 3. Whether a human survival colony has already been established on Mars, or whether plans are still in preparation for its transportation from the...
To Mars, where the cameras is inside the room, behind the window. Why? Because it's too expensive, the craft is too big.
We're getting at the
he said that you had to fit it to an IC something 40.
Yeah.
And you get a jukebox. Does that mean anything?
We've heard of it.
And he said that you've got to play back Valentine's tape. That's all.
We connected up the printed circuit and played once again the videotape that Sir William Ballantyne, before his death, had sent to his friend, John Hendry. This time, we obtained an acceptable picture, which you are now about to see as we saw it.
We're getting a good picture here and can make a fair amount of detail. How is it with you? Fine here, Houston. Roger. Stand by to scan. And you're right. Camera for scanning. Okay, and mode 1 scanning. Stand by and move on. Standing by. Roger, standing by. Hey, isn't that an old river bed? Can you verify that to your town? Roger, Houston, we saw that. Cut the cigar after what you feel like command. Stand by, away. Stand by for ratings, Houston. Standing by, Town. Temperature, Температура 4 градуса Цельсия.
The Russian language.
Wind speed 21 kilometers per hour from southwest.
That a wealthy Southern California movie producer has been shown actual footage of a landing of a bigger ship, and then that ended up with a production of a major fiction film on this topic, which is probably the story behind the film Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So there is a pattern of weaving real footage into fictional or semi-fictional scenarios, and this is the ground that I approached this film, and then further on I discovered many technical details into it.
I have a question.
Yes.
Just to play the devil's advocate here. We are finding our governments have lied to us on virtually everything. They tell us there's no life on Mars. I realize that this is very obvious life there, but how do we know with absolute certainty that there is no life on Mars?
Very good question. I had the same question about the moon, but from Fred Steckling's book you can clearly see the green vegetation at some areas on the moon.
Well, tell us more about that. Both the moon and Mars.
No. It's a very interesting arrangement here. Whenever a camera is sent to a different world, it sits on top of the craft. A lens will be sticking out, but never ever was camera put inside a room with a window. You don't send an unmanned craft. The film has been shown only once in the United States in 1977 by a Los San Francisco station. And
It was just like 1984. It was like George Orwell's 1984, or at least no, I don't mean that. I mean what's his face?
notice the
1939 War of the Worlds.
windows. I thought that it is a fake landing from an earthly helicopter landing on the Earth, but I don't know of any. I'll be very glad of somebody with helicopter experience that can find an American helicopter with a front window of this shape, although I highly doubt it. It is possible. Now, if we remember Bob Emenegger's film, UFOs it has begun. On the 1989 UFO Symposium in Las Vegas, John Lear said that talking with Bob Emenegger about, remember there was a dramatized sequence of a UFO landing on Holloman Air Force Base in the early 50s. And John Lear asked Bob Emenegger, how did they do that shot? It's about a 7-second segment. It's very nice. The UFO comes from atop of the mountain and dives steeply to land on the tarmac. And Bob Emenegger said, no, this is the real sequence. They just allowed us to include that much. So this is one instance where they would weave into a fictional story some real fact or even some real footage. Then there have been persistent rumors that clues that I found in this film.
But we want the sound.
Yes. The actual landing on Mars.
No. Oh, the moon? Yeah. But that's in rare moments, but I haven't had that exposed to anything otherwise, but I guess it's got I just did hear a lecture on that. Yeah. 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 Yeah, I'd like to look into that book more. I don't know.
Yeah. These are messages dropping on the screen in both Russian and English. We see the atmospheric pressure of 0.7 atmospheres, which is pretty good pressure. And finally, when the ship lands, some creature is crawling in the dirt nearby, right in front of them. Obviously disturbed by the...
Look at that.
It's something like a mole.
Jesus.
Well, this is a supposed landing on Mars, shot from a landing probe.